Okay, so here's our point of reference. This is what we're thinking about now, that Ryan Poehling has been diagnosed with a concussion and he will be out. The Montreal Canadiens now have a big opportunity for Nick Suzuki, who, honestly, he's been damn good this preseason. He's only played a handful of games thus far, and sure, he's not perfect, but all the things that we loved about Nick Suzuki in the OHL are starting to slowly seep their way in to the pro NHL game this preseason. Now, as I said, he's not perfect, but what he does exhibit out there on the ice is the ability to control offense, slow the game down, and set up his guys. And Nick Suzuki has a great opportunity now that Ryan Poehling is out. Not to say that we wanted Poehling to be out so that Suzuki could get this opportunity. I think if Habs fans all across the world were asked, they would have wanted both Poehling and Suzuki to make the team. But now that one of them is out, this gives the incentive for the other to rise up tremendously. Let's go over Nick Suzuki, just a little bit of a recap, and just talk about the expectations and what we could probably see in the short-term future with this Montreal Canadiens prospect. Now, we know the story here. Suzuki was drafted as a top talent in the 2017 NHL entry draft. He was one of the first Vegas Golden Knights draft picks ever, and he was traded to Montreal in the Max Pacioretty trade. That also had Tatar and all that too, but Suzuki is the guy that we're focusing on here today. Suzuki played in the Owen Sound Attack, he played with the Guelph Storm, and he was crazy good. His bread and butter in the OHL was being able to set guys up like crazy, score some nifty goals, display his puck skills, and overall manipulate the opponents to opening up the opportunities that he wants for his other guys. This is a playstyle that not too many people thought would translate directly into the NHL, because you're playing against OHLers. They're not the smartest bunch out there. They're not the best. Sure, NHL players are going to be better, but Nick Suzuki has had so many great highlights throughout the past 2 years that it's hard to ignore the talent. So coming into the preseason, Nick Suzuki, as a 5'11" guy, he's a fire hydrant of a player, isn't he? He was a guy that most people had their eyes on because he had that 100-point season in the OHL. Well, actually, he had 94 points, but he lit it up in the playoffs, and that's what really put him on the map with some crazy good goals and an overall skill set that dominated the playoffs. So now Nick Suzuki is in the Montreal Canadiens training camp. He's in their preseason lineup, and that style of play is low-key translating. It's not perfect, but he's finding opportunities to really set up his guys. He's throwing the pucks out into the crease, finding players with that great vision of his, slowing the play down to manipulate the opponents into doing what he wants, and he's looking great. Nick Suzuki has had some really good playmaking opportunities for the guys on his lineup in the Montreal Canadiens game so far. And I think if he keeps it up, he's definitely getting a shot on this team. We saw this with Kotkaniemi last year, the overall level of adjustments that he had to make from the Liga to the NHL, especially as the guy to make the NHL right away as an 18-year-old. In fact, he was the first 2000-born player in any of the Big Four sports to actually play in their leagues, which is cool. But now we're seeing somewhat of a similar path with Suzuki. That transition, that ability to slow the game down and acknowledge the differences between the OHL and the NHL. Which is why this Poehling injury is the best case scenario for a guy like Suzuki, because it gives him all the opportunities to fill in on those roles. So for Nick Suzuki, coming into next season, I'm not surprised if he gets himself upwards of 30, maybe 40 points. He's got potential. And if he's playing on the right spots, then I can totally see him meshing well with some of the other Habs prospects and players that we've seen in the past. Now, Suzuki's actually been given the first line spot in practice. This is from yesterday. The first line right wing spot with Tatar and Danault. And I think if he stays in that spot, we're looking at a legit 50-point player. First year, 50 points, if he's on the first line. Now, the likelihood of him staying on a first line with Tatar and Danault for 82 games is unlikely. That's not going to happen. But that's a great compliment for a young guy straight out of the OHL coming into the NHL training camp. But don't worry though, if you're worried what the heck is going on with Gallagher, I saw some people on Twitter, some people on Reddit saying that it's most likely the case that the coach liked the way that Gallagher played with Domi and Lehkonen. So overall, there's a big shuffling in the lines that's going on at the Canadiens' practice, and if things shape up the way that they're looking to shape up, then we could have a really interesting start to the year for Montreal. Not just Suzuki on that top line, but the way that the rest of the guys are split out. The top 9 is going to see guys like Lehkonen, Domi, Gallagher, and then Drouin, Kotkaniemi, and Byron, and Suzuki, Tatar, and Danault. That's a pretty good top 9. And sure, there's no spot for Ryan Poehling once he comes back, but you never know with a concussion. He's out indefinitely, so let's just work with things as if Poehling is not going to be here for a while. But I, for one, am very excited to see the developments of this story going forward. Not Poehling's concussion, I don't like that at all, but the progression and development of Nick Suzuki. Depending on how this first year goes, he could potentially become a full-fledged top 6 elite potential winger by the time his second or third NHL year rolls around. We're not expecting great things out of him right away, but depending on where he plays, he could range from anywhere from 20 to upwards of even 50 points in his first year. Does he get Calder consideration if that happens? Is he a player who storms that race with Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, Jack Hughes, and the like? Maybe. I'm leaning more towards no, but anything can happen with a player of this offensively talented skill. So, whatever happens next with Suzuki, I'd be very intrigued as to seeing how it all plays out. Now, my only question here is, what exactly does happen to Poehling when he comes back? Because we all know that he's been great. We thought Nick Suzuki looked good. I thought Poehling has looked better throughout the preseason, and an unfortunate little bump is all that it took to sideline him for an indefinite amount of time. So what happens when he's back? Assuming that the top 9 of the Habs is what we talked about before, Tatar, Danault, Suzuki, Lehkonen, Domi, Gallagher, and then you have Drouin, Kotkaniemi, and Byron as your third line. Does Poehling slot in on the fourth line? Is that really an option that we want to go for here? I don't know if I would like to see that. I really don't. I honestly want to see Poehling in a top 9 spot at least, if not a middle 6 role. Sure, you could move like Kotkaniemi to the wing, maybe shove Byron down on the fourth line. I don't know. That's really weird, but like, man, I'm not too sure. Now, the only good thing about this is the fact that our scoring depth is spread out. The top line has Tatar, the second line has Gallagher, that third line has Drouin. So, the way things are spread out, I like seeing that. But still, if you want to distribute the ice time evenly amongst all of these players, it would be kind of tough to fit in a Ryan Poehling when your top 9 is already looking pretty solid. So, maybe Poehling goes the bottom 6 route, but he gets top line power play minutes and top line penalty kill minutes. I don't really know how comfortable I'd feel with that, but once Poehling does come back, I think his spot is pretty much guaranteed on the team, unless they want to say, okay, conditioning, Laval, go. But, you know, I could see it go either way. Either way, though, by the time I think the season is over, Poehling should be a full-time Hab. He was just that good, and I think his game is already more mature than Suzuki's, but Suzuki is more flashy, more pizzazz, more star power, more flash. But they're great players. One of them is out, but this is the ultimate opportunity that the other needed to really get his spot in the NHL. I want you to comment down in the comments below everything you think about Suzuki at this moment, what we saw in the preseason, what we saw at the training camps, and what we saw last year, because he's a great prospect, definitely one that we would like to see with the Habs long term, and I think everybody has high hopes for him. Hope you enjoyed this video. Sociedade Trolls 9, and bye.